It was a cold winter evening when Emily first saw him. She was rushing home from work, her fingers numb from the biting wind, when she noticed the man sitting on the sidewalk near the subway entrance. He was hunched over, his thin jacket doing little to shield him from the cold. His face was gaunt, his eyes filled with exhaustion. As people hurried past, ignoring him like he was invisible, Emily hesitated. Something about him made her stop. She reached into her purse and pulled out the only cash she had left, a crumpled $5 bill. "I hope this helps," she said, offering it to him. The man looked up, his deep brown eyes locking onto hers. He didn't snatch the money like she expected. Instead, he hesitated, studying her face as if trying to memorize it. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice raspy from the cold. Emily smiled. "Of course. Stay warm." And with that, she turned and disappeared into the crowd. She never expected to see him again. Emily was no stranger to struggle. She had worked her way through college, juggling 2 part-time jobs while attending classes. She knew what it was like to feel invisible, to go without, to wonder if tomorrow would be better than today. Maybe that was why she stopped for the stranger that night, because she had once been in a place where a simple act of kindness meant the world. But life moved on. Years passed. Emily climbed the corporate ladder, landing a dream job at a marketing firm. She met Daniel, the man she would later call the love of her life. They built something special, a love that felt unshakable. Now, standing in front of the mirror in her white wedding gown, she could hardly believe the day had finally come. She was marrying Daniel, the man who had stood by her through everything. Her best friend, Rachel, adjusted her veil. "You look stunning," she whispered. Emily took a deep breath, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. Today was supposed to be perfect, but something felt off. A strange tension hung in the air, the kind that made her stomach tighten, though she couldn't explain why. The morning had gone smoothly. The venue was breathtaking, the decorations flawless. Daniel's family and friends had already gathered, eagerly waiting for the ceremony to begin. And yet, as Emily glanced at her reflection, she couldn't shake the unease creeping into her chest. Then, right before the ceremony began, one of the hotel staff rushed up to her. "There's a man outside," she said hesitantly. "He insists on seeing you before you walk down the aisle." Emily frowned. "Who is he?" The woman hesitated. "He wouldn't say, but he says it's important." Rachel scoffed. "Probably some salesman trying to ruin your big day. Should I send him away?" But Emily's curiosity had already taken hold. Something about this felt different, urgent. "I'll be right back," she murmured, gathering the hem of her dress and stepping outside. And that's when she saw him, a man, dressed in an expensive black suit, standing near the entrance. There was something familiar about him, something in his eyes. Her heart pounded as she stepped closer, her heels clicking against the stone pathway. "Emily," the man said softly. "It's been a long time." Emily's breath caught. It was him, the homeless man from all those years ago. But he was different now. No longer frail, no longer defeated. He looked powerful, confident, and he was holding a small black box in his hands. "I never got to thank you," he said. Emily took a step back, her mind spinning. Memories of that freezing night resurfaced. The way he had hesitated before taking the money. The way he had looked at her as if he would never forget. This was impossible. "You? How did you?" She couldn't even form the question. He smiled, his expression unreadable. "A lot can change in a few years." Her hands trembled as she stared at the box. It was polished, expensive-looking, like something that held something more valuable than just jewelry. "I don't understand," Emily whispered. He took a deep breath. That night, you gave me more than money. You gave me hope. And now, it's time for me to return the favor. He slowly opened the box. Inside was something that made Emily's knees go weak. And just like that, everything she thought she knew about this day, about her life, was about to change. Emily's breath hitched as she stared at the open box. Inside wasn't money, jewelry, or anything she expected. It was a deed to a house in her name. Her fingers trembled as she picked up the elegant paper, her eyes darting across the printed words. It was real. The address, the legal stamp, all of it real. She looked up at the man, her mind spinning. What is this? The stranger smiled, a glimmer of emotion flickering in his eyes. It's my way of saying thank you. Emily's heart pounded. I don't understand. Who are you? He exhaled slowly, glancing down at the ground as if gathering his thoughts. My name is Benjamin Carter. He looked back at her. A few years ago, I had nothing. No home, no family, no hope. That night when you gave me that $5, it wasn't about the money. It was the fact that someone, you saw me, treated me like a human being. Emily swallowed hard, her throat tightening. That $5, Benjamin continued, bought me a hot meal. It got me through one more night. And the next morning, something changed. I walked into a homeless shelter. They helped me clean up, gave me a fresh start. And from there, I started working. Emily could barely process his words. I found a mentor, learned about investing, and started a small business, he explained. At first, it was just enough to get by, but I kept going. I worked harder than I ever had in my life. And eventually, that small business grew. His voice softened. It grew into Carter Enterprises. Emily felt like the world was spinning. She knew that name. Everyone did. Carter Enterprises was one of the most successful real estate investment companies in the country. Her hands gripped the paper tightly. You mean you're that Carter? Benjamin chuckled. I don't blame you for not recognizing me. I looked a little different back then. Emily couldn't believe what she was hearing. This man, this former homeless man she had once given $5 to, was now a multimillionaire. But why the house? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Benjamin's expression turned serious. Because I know what it's like to struggle. And I also know that kindness can change everything. I don't know your situation, Emily. Maybe you don't need this house. Maybe you do. But I wanted you to have it. Emily felt tears sting her eyes. This was too much. Too unbelievable. But why now? Why at my wedding? She asked. Benjamin hesitated. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out an old, crumpled receipt. Emily frowned, taking it from his hand. As she unfolded it, her breath caught. It was her handwriting. Years ago, when she had handed him the money, she had been in a hurry and grabbed the only bill she had in her purse. And on the back, she had scribbled her name and an old phone number. Just a careless note. A random, forgettable thing. But to Benjamin, it had been a lifeline. I kept it, he admitted. For years, it reminded me of the moment everything changed. Emily's vision blurred with tears. This wasn't just about a $5 bill. It was about hope, about kindness, about the smallest actions creating the biggest ripples. Her hands shook as she stared at the deed again. This man, who had once been lost and invisible, had built himself back up, all because of a single act of kindness. And now he was changing her life in return. Benjamin smiled. I don't expect anything in return. I just wanted you to know that what you did, it mattered. Emily wiped her eyes, overwhelmed. Rachel, who had been silent the entire time, finally whispered, This is unreal. Emily let out a shaky laugh. Tell me about it. At that moment, Daniel appeared at the entrance, his brow furrowed. "Em? What's going on?" Emily turned, her heart still racing. "Daniel, this is Benjamin." She paused. "And he just gave us a house." Daniel blinked. "He what?" Benjamin extended a hand. "Nice to meet you, Daniel." Daniel shook it cautiously, still confused. Wow." Benjamin chuckled. "Yeah, it's a lot, I know." Emily stared at the paper in her hands. This wasn't just a gift. It was a reminder that even in the smallest moments, kindness could change a life. Benjamin sighed. "I won't keep you any longer. This is your big day. I just wanted to make sure you knew." Emily took a deep breath. Then suddenly, impulsively, she stepped forward and hugged him. "Thank you," she whispered. "Not just for this, but for reminding me why small moments matter." Benjamin smiled. "You reminded me first." With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Emily watched him go, still reeling from everything that had just happened. Then, slowly, she turned to Daniel. "What do we do now?" she whispered. Daniel grinned. "Well, we get married." She let out a breathless laugh. "Yeah, we do." And as she stepped back inside, preparing to walk down the aisle, she knew this was a story she would tell for the rest of her life. The story of how a small act of kindness came back to her in the most extraordinary way. But before you go, remember this: every action, no matter how small, has the power to change a life. So, if you believe in the power of kindness, hit that like button, share this story, and don't forget to subscribe. Because here, we tell stories that inspire, stories that remind us that the world is full of unexpected miracles. See you in the next story.